Okay, good morning, everybody. Hello. My name is Angelica Carey, and I am from the Office of Comprehensive Planning with the Division of Planning and Development at the City of Memphis. Thank you for taking the time out of your other virtual meetings and spending that with us. This summit has been in the making since early this year, where members of Food Insecurity and Food Accessibility Collaborative have discussed the need to strategize on making changes to local policy, but also to connect those in Memphis's food network and hopefully develop solutions for issues regarding food in the city. With that, I'd like to introduce Mr. Paul Young, Director of Memphis Housing and Community Development, who is here to speak on the behalf of the mayor today.
Hi, Angelica, and hello, everyone. Thank you all for having me today. On behalf of Mayor Strickland, I want to thank you all for this convening and welcome you to this dialogue. This is an important topic to the city of Memphis. Obviously, in the Division of Housing and Community Development, we primarily focus on built things, so housing units. We've also done a little work with grocery stores. But one of the things that I often say is that none of this work matters if we don't focus on the people that occupy the buildings that we are constructing. And one of the things that's really important is ensuring that all families are able to access healthy foods and alternatives. And so we 100% support this initiative, and we're excited that you guys are connecting and having this dialogue, because it's going to take all of us to build the type of system of care that we need in this community. And so I want to thank you guys for this convening and look forward to hearing how things go today.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Paul Young, and we appreciate you coming. All right, so a brief introduction that before we move into the next session. Food encompasses all aspects of life, just how one's life and the quality of it also relies on food. We titled the event the Memphis Food Systems Summit, recognizing that in order to have significant impacts, all of us must think of ourselves as part of a greater system and how we play our part. The team that has worked to put this summit together represent many sectors that have direct impact with the food that residents eat and the health services they receive. We have worked to bring experts and local champions here today to help us have a greater understanding of food security and its impacts on health. And then later in breakout groups, we'd like to hear from all of you to come up with some innovative solutions to Memphis's food-specific challenges. And now we'll hear from Dr. Morris, the CEO of Church Health.
Great, thank you, Angelica. So I can tell you from the Church Health perspective, we've been looking forward to this day for quite a while. This is something we care deeply about. I think for all of us, we know that food is at the heart of who we are as human beings. Our mothers told us that you are what you eat, and she was right. It is, though, a challenge that, to find a way for everyone to have high quality food, it just doesn't magically happen. Speaking, I think, on behalf of the faith community, across the broad section of Memphis, there are two things that Memphis has in great abundance: poverty and religion. We actually believe that the religious community could have a major impact on these issues of food, because every faith community uses food as a central means to bind us all together. Just from a Christian perspective, in the New Testament, Jesus tells a parable of the great feast. Everybody, rich and poor, in the beginning, everybody that is invited are people of means. They're very wealthy. And then for whatever reason, they choose not to attend the banquet. At which point, Jesus then says, bring everybody to the table. It doesn't matter who you are. We are all invited to the great feast. So when I was 5 and 6 years old, in the summer, I would spend the summer with my grandfather, who had an old pickup truck. This is actually sort of how he made his living. but I grew up in Atlanta, and we would go to the Atlanta Farmers Market, which was where farmers would bring literally their produce into town, and then people like my grandfather would come and buy food directly from the farmer, and then we would go to poor neighborhoods and he would resell it. So as a 5 or 6 year old, it was just a fantastic feeling for me to be measuring tomatoes or green beans and passing it out. It felt like I was doing something that mattered. However, that can't be the way we distribute food across the community in today's world. The problem of getting high quality foods to people who need it is a huge logistical challenge. I can tell you here at Church Health, this issue of food is one of the core values that we live off of. When you come to Crosstown Concourse, when you enter the West Atrium, the first thing you see is our nutrition center and our nutrition hub. We very much value the issue of how we get food to our broader community. Literally just yesterday, there were 5 women. Prior to COVID, there would have been a lot more of them cooking in our kitchen with the idea of cooking healthy meals so that our patients who we believe are food insecure, when they leave our clinic, they also leave with a healthy meal for not just themselves, but for their family that night. Look, this is not a solution to the problem, but it is a way to sort of begin the process for people to be introduced and find a way to help them address the type of issues that this conference is all about. And then COVID has not necessarily been so terrible for us in all regards. For example, our dietitians only now meet people virtually because they're able to literally go into somebody's kitchen and look into their refrigerator. This is a much better way to talk one-on-one about people about how to improve their health habits. We're never going back to in-person visits with our dietitians. And then lastly, just a few weeks ago, we had a patient who was struggling mightily, as many people have from a behavioral health standpoint, emotionally because of COVID, and was worried about keeping her appointment with one of our counselors. Virtually, we were able to do it. And we had that counseling session while she was standing in line at a food pantry in order to get food. We accomplished 2 things at the same time. So being creative here is very much what we all have to find a way to do, because let's not forget, we are all invited to the great banquet. We need to find a way for everybody to come together in Memphis and the greater beyond, to find a way for us to do this together. That's what this summit's about. I can assure you that's why Church Health is here. Now, with my story about the food pantry, what better person to lead us off today than Kathy Pope? Kathy is the president and CEO of the Mid-South Food Bank. I feel confident everybody here knows Kathy at this point. I don't need to really introduce her. She came from the Gulf Coast in 2019 to lead the Mid-South Food Bank. I'm also guessing that most of you have toured the Mid-South Food Bank, and I can assure you, I don't think I'm overstating this, that the food bank today is not your grandmother's food bank. It is an amazing operation that we should all be very proud of. And Kathy, I'm looking forward to hearing what you have to say. Thanks for being here.
Thank you, Dr. Morris, very much. I'm thrilled to be here. So can everyone hear me okay? Yes? Okay, good. I got a thumbs up. Thank you for that. I'm thrilled to be here with you all this morning. After all, Mid-South Food Bank, we're all about food. We're about getting food out to those who need it. As Dr. Morris said, I came here a little over a year ago in August. I'm very thankful that I had a few months to get my feet planted pretty firmly here in Memphis and Mid-South before the pandemic hit. And then we went in disaster mode. And I was thankful that I have been through a disaster on the Gulf Coast. We're in hurricane mode about 10 months out of the year. And this year's been particularly tough on the Gulf Coast, but it was a good experience because we jumped into action, and I'm very, very proud of this staff and the way that we have responded to the pandemic. So let me tell you a little bit about the food bank if you don't know. So I'm going to share my screen, and if I can get a thumbs up that I'm okay. Thumbs up, Angel, that I can, you can see my screen. Okay, perfect. Okay, so the mission of the food bank is to change lives by eliminating hunger in the Mid-South. Our vision is to turn hunger into hope. And basically, we, being able to have this huge warehouse. So I'm coming from a warehouse in Mobile, Alabama that was 40,000 square feet. This new facility is 150,000 square feet. So you can see that it's quite an amazing facility. So what do? Well, we connect families with food. So our job is to make sure that we're getting food into the warehouse and then out into the Mid-South. We're getting food, you know, a lot in the back door, but a lot is going out the front door really, really quickly. So one of the things I'm really proud of is that of all the 200 food banks in the country that are affiliated with Feeding America, we are all picking up from retail store. So we have partnerships on a national level with the Kroger, Walmart, Publix on the Gulf Coast, but here, Costco. So we're out with our trucks every day picking up what they are pulling from the shelves because it is nearing expiration. The can is slightly dented. The vegetables and the fruit, any produce is nearing expiration. So we can get it out the door very, very quickly. We have 30 bays here at this facility. So we have a lot of cooler space. So the produce goes from a refrigerated truck to a refrigerated section in the warehouse, and then a refrigerated truck to get it out the community. So I'm really happy with how much food we are able to rescue in the community. We build great relationships with local farmers. We had done this on the Gulf Coast pretty strong. We made sure that we knew where all the farmers were, what were they planting, make sure that they know that if they need to donate food as opposed to destroying it, you can donate it to the food bank. But then we also pay what's called a pick and pack out when the farmer says, I'm done, I've got 40% left in the ground, but I don't have a market for it, then we can pay a pick and pack out fee and get that produce. So we're paying for the farmer to pay someone to pull it, box it, and then we go pick it up. Meal Connect, this is a nationwide program that we connect restaurants and any kind of sponsorship thing that has happened in the community, a parade, a party, a festival, or whatever. If you have food left over, there is an app that you can go in and take a picture of the food, tell what it is. It'll connect you to a volunteer that we have trained and outfitted with blankets and that type of thing to maintain temperature if needed. And then we can get it immediately to a partner agency that can serve it. We have partner agencies that serve 3 meals a day. SNAP application assistance. SNAP is so dear to my heart because I know the statistics of how that is the first line of defense against hunger. So we really work in the background advocacy-wise to make sure that we are very pro-SNAP. What cuts down on the red tape? How can we make sure that more people are signing up for SNAP benefits that they may qualify for anyway? Not an easy system to go through, but we have SNAP coordinators that help with that. Mobile pantry distributions. I hope that you have seen how many mobile pantry distributions we've had in the Mid-South since the pandemic hit. Prior to the pandemic, we were doing about 60 in a month, and we've been doing well over 200 because that has been a way for us to, we load the truck up with food, We have a location. We've got the volunteers lined up. We're partnering with someone in the community. The cars are already lined up, and we're able to get that food, the groceries into the car, the trunk or the back seat, social distance, have masks and gloves. So we're being very protective of our volunteers and the folks that are helping us. But we have done an amazing job of ramping up that mobile pantry distribution. I hope that you've been to one. Please try to volunteer so that you can serve in that capacity in the Mid-South if you can. It is quite the joy to see the families come through and that we're able to give them food. 80% of what we're serving right now is fresh produce. So I'm really proud of the nutritious value of the meal. Our agency partners are everything to us. We have 300 partner agencies that we work through with the Mid-South. And there are brick and mortar pantries that we supply that food to them. And then if you're hungry in a rural area, perhaps, maybe it's, and we serve North Mississippi too, but maybe you're in Tipton County. We've got partner agencies that have their hours that they're open, and we make sure that we have food that we're getting to them so that the client can come to that partner agency if they are hungry and get food. So this is our distribution. This is the food source. I will tell you, right when the pandemic hit, we were already meeting as a leadership team because you could hear what was happening. And we all said, if Shelby County schools closed, we're going to have long lines because we know our children depend on that breakfast and lunch. And so we already had orders in the queue before March 12 when Shelby County School closed. But we also started looking at, in our leadership meetings, I'm like, all right, guys, where's the food? Go find the food, leave no stone left unturned. So we have had 96% growth compared to the last fiscal because of how many pounds of food we have gotten in this warehouse and out the door since March of this year. So our fiscal year ended June 30, so starting July 1 is a new fiscal for us. In fiscal 19, we distributed 16.2 million pounds of food, averaging about 1.5 million a month, and that has been about consistent for this food bank. And to be completely honest, we were a little bit underperforming. We were not meeting the need in the Mid-South. So we knew we were going to ramp that up anyway. But since the pandemic hit, and we've been able to partner with some other organizations that have gotten a ton of food in the door, we have distributed 31.8 million pounds of food just since July 1. So it's been pretty amazing. Well, that was July 1, 2019 to ending June 2020. So in that 12 months, so that took a little bit of those pandemic months. We have had USDA, Department of Ag, huge partner of ours. They supply us with an amazing amount of food. And I'm trying to look at my time here. And so 20% of what we get is from that. And we purchased some, like I said, we had orders in the queue already. Donated includes from pickup from the grocery store, but then we have manufacturers that will donate some food. So the total pounds distributed in the first quarter of fiscal 21, which would be starting July 1 of this year, is almost 17 million pounds of food. It's astounding. I do want to talk very briefly, and Angelia, if you'll, Ms. Carey, if you'll tell me if I need to cut it for time wise, because I think I got started a tiny late. Okay, so the food insecurity rate in the Mid-South jumped from 17% to almost 25% during COVID-19. So 455,000 plus are not getting enough food to eat in the Mid-South. Nationally, the rate is 11.5. So you can look at what the rates are for Tennessee, Mississippi, and Arkansas, because we do serve Crittenden, Arkansas across the river, and we have 18 North Mississippi counties, 12 in West Tennessee. Shelby County being our largest need county. So 1 in 4 people are living with food insecurity, and 30% of our children are food insecure. They don't know where their next meal is coming from. And additionally, University of Memphis tells us that 44% of our children live in poverty. This is a great little interactive map. It's called Map the Meal Gap. And you can go online and look at that, and it's really a lot of fun to look at the statistics and see how we're doing. Very briefly, I'm going to tell you just about how the food distribution started going once that pandemic hit in March. You can see that the pounds we distributed this year, so March was 2.3 million, and that would compare to an average of pre-COVID of 1.5 million. You can look at how we jumped up in April to 4.7, and then 6 million pounds in May. That was where we started seeing, we were doing a mobile distribution to serve 300 families, and 500 would show up. And then we would say, okay, guys, we need enough food for 500 families, and then 700 would show up. We actually have a partner in the Hispanic community, a new partner, so fantastic. They are serving 1,000 families in one distribution. It's astounding. Our high month was in July, 6.6. And so there again, you know, we're hovering at about 5.3 million averaging every year. So the total pounds is 35 million pounds. Again, we're at the food bank, when we talk pounds, we're like, we can't even believe we've found that much food. So we're really excited. So this is our retail store level pickup. Again, very happy about the food rescue that we do. Could we do better? Absolutely, and we're working on it. Again, we've got partners with all of these retail outlets. 75% of the donated food is coming from our retail store level, so it's a big program for us. Again, this is the Meal Connect, concerts, festivals, hotels. Where is the food that's already prepared, and we're trying to salvage that through our Meal Connect. Now that food does not come to the warehouse, it goes straight to a partner agency. And we had 3.8 million pounds that we did in fiscal 20. So we're all about building relationships. Of any of you that did not know what the food bank does, if there is any way we can partner, I would love to have that conversation. Please know that we order food on a very large scale. So we're not ordering 1 can of green beans, we're ordering 3 truckloads of green beans. Therefore, we can get it at a great discount. So if you need to order food, you may want to look at being a partner with us in getting that food at a cheaper rate. Local farmers, again, this is pretty new for this food bank, but we are doing a great job of reaching out to our local farmers. Again, we pay some pick and pack out. We don't want to always say with our hand open, you know, what can you donate? We want to be a part of the solution. So we do raise money to make sure we can pay that farmer for his produce. Again, SNAP assistance. I love SNAP so much. I know how much people need it. I think the statistics are about 40% of people, of seniors who would qualify, do not get the SNAP benefit. So it's important to keep that program going and letting people know how to sign up. So I went through it pretty quick because I think I'm running out of time, but if you have any questions, that is my contact information. I love this community so much. I felt immediately at home here, and I want to be part of the solution as the food bank does. So thank you so much.
All right, thank you, Kathy, so much for that presentation. You actually have 5 minutes, so if you have anything that you'd like to reiterate or highlight, you've got a little bit of time, otherwise we'll move on.
Okay, well, I'd love to elaborate a little bit on our partners. So during the pandemic, we have 300 partner agencies, and we call them our brick and mortar pantries. That's going to be your neighborhood church, neighborhood Christian. So we supply food for them for their pantries. We knew that our brick and mortars could, and again, a lot of them are run by seniors. So when we were doing Safer at Home, they were going home. We had about 20% of them could not open immediately. They closed their doors and went home, which we completely understand, which is why we did so many mobile pantries to make up for that. But then additionally, our brick and mortars, if they're used to serving 50 families a month, they're not going to be able to serve 300. They just don't have the capacity. So I'm very proud of how we've been able to respond via our mobile pantries, but we've only been successful because of those partnerships. And we are really praying now that some of those partners that stepped up wanting to serve the community is able to do that on a permanent basis. We need permanent, strong partners that have a a heart to serve, but they also have the capacity to get those volunteers there. You need about 15 volunteers to run a mobile pantry, and we've got it down to a science. We train them, we give them what they need, we supply the food, but there's a little bit of work to be done. So you've got to be a little bit strong enough to lift boxes and all of that type thing. So if you want to help, if you want to partner, you can go on our website, midsouthfoodbank.org, and go under the volunteer section. Call us if you know of any unmet need in our community. Geographically, right when this pandemic started, we literally laid out a map of Shelby County with Shelby County schools, and we made sure that we were hitting all aspects of our community. Again, could we do better? Yes, and we're working on it, but we are making sure that those that need food are getting the food. Tennessee Emergency Management, I can't speak highly enough of that group. They stepped in, they're ordering food like crazy. Farmers to Families Food Boxes, that was the USDA program. Great program, and we're really happy about those additional products. Now, those two resources for food will go away at some point. Tennessee Emergency Management is only helping us because we're in a disaster. Farmers to Food Families, we have finished the 3rd phase. I don't think there'll be another one. There may, but we work really hard to make sure that we're getting enough food in the door to serve the community. Right now, we're hoping we can maintain about 5 million pounds a month for the Mid-South until we can get over this pandemic and people can get back to work, because we know that we're going to be needed for the next 12 months a lot stronger than we ever have. This continued need to help our economy get back. So we're here to serve. Please contact us if you know of an unmet need. We work really, really hard. Someone's asking, can you tell us where you see unmet food access needs? Well, we have food deserts, and you can kind of look up food deserts and research what that is, but we have some maps that tell us where people do not have access to food. No grocery stores, maybe only convenience stores. They don't have transportation. So we do have some places in Memphis that are food deserts, and we particularly focus on those areas with our mobile distributions, because again, we can take a truck somewhere in Shelby County. We've already organized it and orchestrated it ahead of time. We show up, the cars are lined up, everybody gets their food, and then we all go home in 4 hours. Nobody has to store, refrigerate, freeze food. So that's just a really great quick access, and we're able to go into communities that don't have consistent access to nutritious food. So does anybody else have any questions?
Kathy, thank you. I see that there is one other question. If someone is interested in scheduling a mobile distribution, who should they contact?
Okay, go on our website at midsouthfoodbank.org, and you're going to click mobile pantries. There's going to be some information about how to host a mobile pantry, what you need to do, and then who to contact to set that up.
Okay, great. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
All right. So now we're going to have Pedro Velasquez introduce Dr. Lustig. And after Dr. Lustig presents, we will take a 10-minute break before we go into the individual Zoom team meetings. So because of timing, we do want to make sure to have a brief session of questions at the end. Please make sure to write your questions in the chat box, and we'll be doing our best to go through them after the presentation.
So thanks, Angelica, and thanks, Kathy, for that overview of why we're all here today. I mean, it definitely helps put things in perspective as to why it's so important to develop effective and self-sustaining solutions to combat food insecurity. And personally, from how we've worked with the Mid-South Food Bank over the last 2 years, I particularly want to thank y'all for how intentional you are in not just combating food insecurity, but the additional efforts that are being made to put healthier food in these communities, not just any food. So Angelica mentioned, my name is Pedro Velasquez. I'm Operations Director at LifeDoc Health. And personally, I'm very grateful for the opportunity to spend some time learning from a man who's not only been a big influence on the work LifeDoc Health has been doing for 20 years, but also personally a man who, when I was a kid, to cheer me up when I was sick as a patient at St. Jude's, brought me a boomerang from one of his conferences in Australia, although I'm not sure if he remembers that or not.
I remember.
So many of you know Dr. Lustig probably from a popular documentary, Fed Up, but actually his career is focused on the regulation of energy balance and the pathogenesis of cardiometabolic and mental health diseases. Dr. Lustig graduated from MIT in 1976, received his MD from Cornell in 1980, completed his pediatric residency at St. Louis Children's Hospital in 83, and his clinical fellowship at University of California, San Fran in 84. From there, he spent 6 years as a research associate in neuroendocrinology at Rockefeller University. And before moving back to San Fran in 2001, he spent a lot of years here in Memphis, working at St. Jude's and UT on pediatric obesity, which is where he started working with LifeDoc and my father, and helped catalyze what we've been doing. After moving back to California, he received his master's in law from UC Hastings. And from there, he's now professor of pediatrics in the Division of Endocrinology at the Institute for Health Policy Studies at the University of California. He's one of the leaders of the anti-sugar and real food movements to improve global health. And Dr. Lustig is also the chief science officer of Eat Real, a nonprofit dedicated to reversing childhood obesity and diabetes by impacting the global food supply. So as I'm reading through all of these, you'll probably seeing why he's such a good option for being a part of this conversation and introducing what the impact of the food system is on the health system. He's on the advisory board of various organizations focused on mental and metabolic health. And as if that were not enough, Dr. Lustig is the author of more than 200 academic works and of the popular books Fat Chance Cookbook, The Hacking of the American Mind, and a new book that's going to come out in 2021 called Metabolical, The Lure and Lies of the Processed Food Nutrition and Modern Medicine. Believe it or not, this is just a brief summary of what he's been doing over the course of his career and his efforts to change what's going on in the food system in general. I'm sure that after this presentation, you'll see why I'm so excited to have him speaking today and supporting the efforts that we're doing in Memphis as the Memphis Food Insecurity Collaborative is getting the right people at the table to have some great conversations and implement comprehensive and effective solutions. All that being said, I'm going to stop talking now and let you take it from here, Doctor. Ready whenever you are.
Thank you, Pedro. What a nice introduction. And yes, I do remember the boomerang. I was going to bring you a didgeridoo, but I couldn't figure out how to get it into the luggage. I have no, first of all, thank you for inviting me. Welcome to everyone. I have known Pedro and his father, Big Pedro, for over 20 years. And as little Pedro said, I've first became acquainted with both of them because Pedro had to move from Venezuela to Memphis to get care for little Pedro at St. Jude. And Pedro was my first research associate. The big Pedro was my first research associate. And it is because of him that I've actually been able to do anything in the field of obesity. So I give my start to you and to Memphis. I want to start though with a story that's very relevant to this Food Systems Summit. In 2000, I was a member of the Memphis Area Society of Parenteral and Enteral Nutrition, called MASPN, primarily University of Tennessee professors. And we were very concerned about the lack of available food in Orange Mound. And we ended up having an audience with the Board of Aldermen down at City Hall. And I remember going down there, and there were 17 members of the Board of Aldermen all sitting up on the dais. And we presented our case about the fact that basically there were only convenience stores in Orange Mound, and that people who were the most vulnerable, had the least access to real food. And I remember that the head of the Board of Aldermen looking down his nose at the for 5 of us and saying the following: you want to take away the single thing that gives these people pleasure? And I did not have an answer for that back in 2000. But I certainly do have an answer for that in 2020. And you will see what that answer is now in this talk. This talk is called The Hateful or Grateful 8, and you will see why as we go. So with apologies to Quentin Tarantino, I've renamed all the characters, and you'll see why. So as Pedro said, I do have these disclosures. I did write these books for the general public. I particularly want to note this new book that's coming out on May 4th called Metabolical: Learn the Lies of Processed Food, Nutrition, and Modern Medicine, which will basically take all of medicine, dentistry, and dietetics and stand it on its head, because we've gotten it wrong for 50 years. And as he also mentioned, I'm the chief science officer of a like-minded nonprofit called Eat Real, and we are getting real food into California and other school districts around the country. We have gotten rid of 270,000 pounds of sugar from the Mount Diablo Unified School District in 1 year. That's 10 pounds of sugar per kid per year. I'm also a consultant to a psychiatric consultancy in London called Nutritious Minds, which uses real food to heal ADD and depression. And also I am the chief medical officer of a startup called Fugal, which you should know about because it'll be coming to your neighborhood soon. It is a digital platform that ties together 4 stakeholders: the patient, the doctor, the grocery store, and the insurance company, in order for the insurance company to pay for only real food that the patient orders online. And so to make food medicine. Okay, so let's start with the problem. This paper came out in 2001, as you can see, and it's based on 2000 data. What they did was they calculated the entire burden of diabetes around the world in the year 2000, and they came up with 151 million. And based on the current, at that time, the rate of increase, they anticipated in 2010 that there would be 221 million, or 46% increase, which actually is a projected annualized inflation rate of 3.88%. This is not what happened. What happened was, instead of 221 million, there were actually 285 million, for an annualized inflation rate of 6.55%. And by 2014, with all of the attention, with all the media, and with all the food systems change that people were bringing to the table, we were up to 422 million. That's an annualized inflation rate of 10.3%. And wait, it gets worse, because in 2019, we were up to 463 million, and projected now for 2030 is 568 million. WTF. The only way you can explain this is that doctors cause diabetes, because we're watching it and it's happening. And there's almost a little bit of truth to that. And I'll explain why as we go. Now, if you look at what's happened to our medical establishment, here are the costs for hospitals in red. Here are the costs for physicians in green, and here are the costs for pharma here in purple. They do not add up to the total costs of healthcare going on, because the rest of it is going to the care and treatment of chronic metabolic disease, such as type 2 diabetes, renal failure, fatty liver disease, heart disease, etc. And even though we are spending so much money on it, on this slide, you can see here's healthcare expenditures versus life expectancy. And here are all the other countries in the world. And you'll notice that all of them are having a little bit of a problem nowadays compared to earlier in time. But take a look at what's happened to us. I mean, we have just gone off the rails. And it happened here around 1975, when things started to basically slide. And at this point, we are having a major health crisis, not just because of COVID, but because of this. This is actually the bigger pandemic. And the problem is everybody thinks there's a pill for it, and nobody wants to do anything about it. This is having an impact on Social Security. Now, as you all, I'm sure, are aware, Social Security is a Ponzi scheme, okay? It's no different from Bernie Madoff. The only difference is the government gets to keep your money instead of Bernie. So you have young, healthy people paying in here at the bottom, and old, infirm people here at the top taken out. But what if the young, healthy people down at the bottom are not healthy? What if they're unhealthy? What if they're not paying in? What if they're actually taking out because of their dialysis and because of their heart disease and because of their diabetes? The entire pyramid collapses. And this is why the Congressional Budget Office says that in 2029, Social Security is going to fall off a cliff. Now, I'll be very honest with you. I'm going to be 72 in the year 2029, and I want my friggin' Social Security. I worked hard for it. You did too. I paid in. They're not going to be able to pay out. And that is very unfair, in the words of some orange guy in Washington. Very unfair. The fact of the matter is, our life expectancy is going down now 4 years in a row for the first time in our lives. This is the OECD aggregate. That is the 37 most developed countries in the world. And you'll notice they're doing a whole lot better, and they're still on an increased trajectory. Look what's happened to us. We have fallen off the curve. And actually other countries, I mean, third world countries, have caught up to us in terms of life expectancy. Who'd have thunk it? So what is wrong? What has happened? How do we explain this in order to be able to fix it? Because you can't fix a problem if you don't understand what the problem is. This is going to explain the problem. This Venn diagram. On this Venn diagram, we have the entire US adult population, 240 million. 30% obese, BMI over 30, 70% normal weight, BMI under 30. Everyone in the country is in one of the two circles, and you know who you are. Now, the standard mantra from the doctors and the dietitians and the Surgeon General and the Institute of Medicine and the NIH and the White House and Congress and the food industry is the following. 80% of those obese individuals, 80% of those 30%, 57 million people are sick. They're fat and they're sick, and they're sick because they're fat. And if they would only just diet and exercise, we could solve this problem. That's what they say. Garbage. Total trash. Complete trash. Anybody see why? It's on the slide. The reason it's trash is the following. It is true that 80% of 30% are metabolically ill. I don't argue that. That is absolutely true. But that means 20% are not. 20% of the obese population are metabolically healthy. We actually have a name for them, MHO, metabolically healthy obese. They will live a completely normal life, die at a completely normal age, not cost the taxpayer a dime. They're just fat. Now, conversely, 40% of the normal weight population, all those people BMI under 30, have the exact same diseases as the obese do. They get type 2 diabetes, hypertension, lipid problems, cardiovascular disease, cancer, dementia too. Now they get it at a lower rate, 40% versus 80%. I don't argue that. No question that obesity is a risk factor, but it is not a cause. And the reason it's not a cause is because normal weight people get it too. Well, if normal weight people get it too, how can it be about behavior? This looks more like exposure, like cholera or influenza or even COVID-19 for that matter. And I'll prove that to you on this slide. So on this slide, we have CT scans of two equally weighted individuals. Notice trunk fat, 12.8, 12.8, okay? Now, one's healthy, one's sick. Which one's healthy, which one's sick? A or B? Turns out A is the healthy one. He's got big love handles. He's got big butt fat. He's got subcutaneous fat. Cosmetically undesirable, metabolically inert. Nothing wrong with this guy. Conversely, this guy down here, he's got fat all around his organs. He's got visceral fat. He's got big belly fat. Turns out the big belly fat is way more dangerous than the big butt fat. But on the scale, you can't tell the difference. They're the same. We have a name for this condition. It's called TOFI, TOFI. Thin on the outside, fat on the inside, real medical term, 1,500 Medline citations. So my question to you right now, sitting here on Zoom right now, are you a TOFI? Do you know? How would you know? How could you know? Does your doctor know? If your doctor knows, how come your doctor isn't telling you? And if your doctor knows, why is your doctor not doing anything about it? Because this is what's going to kill you. And here's what's really going on, even more granular, and that is it's going on in the liver. Okay, so on the left, we have normal liver. These are sinusoids here and bile canaliculi and Kupffer cells and everything, all well with the world here. And on the right over here, we have what we call fatty liver disease. Okay, big fat vacuoles and macrophages moving in and the beginning of fibrosis. Okay, this is what leads to cirrhosis. The problem is you can't tell, you can't tell if the cause of this fatty liver disease is alcohol or sugar. And the reason is because sugar and alcohol metabolize the same way. And we know that because after all, where do you get alcohol from? Fermentation of sugar. It's called wine. We do it here in Napa and Sonoma every day. If it were just alcohol, then how come 5-year-olds now have fatty liver disease? They don't drink alcohol. But boy, oh boy, do they drink sugar. So it turns out this non-alcoholic fatty liver disease is now the leading cause of liver transplant in the country, having superseded hepatitis C. You want to talk about a pandemic? This is a pandemic. And this slide shows that it's not just the obese. So here's the obese, BMI over 25 over here. And for different countries around the world, as you can see in the second column, okay? And yes, of course, the obese have a higher rate, no argument. But you'll notice there's a significant signal even in people who are normal weight all around the world. And if you look here, here's BMI on the x-axis, and here's the hazard risk ratio for fatty liver disease. You'll notice in the overweight category, it's here. And if you have diabetes, if you have fatty liver disease, you are 3.5 times more likely to develop diabetes in your lifetime. So you want to know what's going on with all those diabetics all over the world. They also have fatty liver. And the question is, what gave it to them? And the answer will be coming. So here's a way to think about it in image terms, in a picture, okay? Because a picture's worth 1,000 words. Over here, we have what is known as an MRI Fat Fraction Map, okay, looking right through a person. And you'll notice this person's obese, the love handle's here on the side. But I want you to take a look at this guy's liver. 2.6% liver fat, dark. This is normal. This is fine. Nothing wrong with this guy. This guy's healthy. Yeah, he's got some extra weight, but he's healthy. This guy over here is more like what you would expect to see. Notice obesity, but take a look at this guy's liver. 24% liver fat. This is fatty liver disease. This person has what we call metabolic syndrome. This person is at risk for all these diseases. And finally, let's take a look at this guy here. Notice, no obesity, no love handles, but take a look at this guy's liver, 23% liver fat. Thin sick, fat healthy. So the moral of this story is it's not the fat you can see that matters. It's the fat you can't. And you can't see it, and your doctor can't see it, except they can if they know what they're doing. Problem is they don't know what they're doing. And I know because I just wrote a friggin' book about it. So obesity is not the problem. What is the problem is metabolic syndrome, and that's where all the money goes. 75% of all healthcare dollars go to these diseases, of which diabetes is the sentinel disease. But hypertension, lipid problems, heart disease, fatty liver disease, polycystic ovarian disease, cancer, dementia are all metabolic diseases. And as you will learn in a moment, they are all mitochondrial diseases. The mitochondria are the little energy burning factories inside cells. Now, the problem with all of these diseases is none of them are curable. None. They all just have treatments. And it turns out those treatments aren't even treatments, because those treatments for those diseases just treat the symptoms of the disease, not the disease itself. It's like giving an aspirin to a patient with a brain tumor because they have a headache. Are you treating the brain tumor? You might be treating the headache, but are you fixing the disease process? No, you're covering it up. Well, statins cover up the heart disease process. Oral hypoglycemics cover up the diabetes process. Okay, antihypertensives cover up the hypertension process, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. It turns out there are 8 subcellular pathologies that are going on underneath, inside all of your cells, all of the time, that are actually driving all of these diseases, and we can't get to them. And here they are. These are the hateful 8. When those processes are working right, they actually keep you healthy. They increase your lifespan and they increase your health span so that you can live to 110 and play tennis. But when they're working wrong, you will die a slow and miserable death. A 45-year-old in a dialysis unit with leg amputations and blindness, heart disease and stroke, cancer, dementia, etc. Okay, it's all about these hateful or grateful 8 and what you do with them as to whether or not you will live a long life or whether you will succumb to your diet. And here are the 8. Okay, and we're going to go through each of them very briefly. And I understand there are a lot of non-doctors in the room. Okay, but you need to understand what is going on and that medicine can't fix it. Because if you think medicine can fix it, okay, basically you've been sold snake oil, not fish oil. And that's the point. Okay, I am here to teach you the difference between snake oil and real medicine. So, number 1, glycation. 2, oxidative stress. 3, mitochondrial dysfunction. 4, insulin resistance. 5, membrane instability. 6, inflammation. 7, epigenetics or methylation, depending on who you ask. 8, autophagy. These 8 processes are not ICD-9 or 10 or 11 codes. Okay, your doctor cannot put these down on your medical history because they don't get billed, they don't get reimbursed, because none of them are true diseases. They're pathologies, underlying diseases. So we don't even have a way of keeping track of them. And lastly, none of these pathways are druggable, except maybe inflammation, and that's a question mark too. But they're all foodable, and I will show you how. So let's take number 1, glycation. Here are 5 pictures of food. What do they share in common? One thing. There's one thing about these 5 pictures. They're all brown. They're all brown. Okay, the common link, the browning reaction, known as the Maillard reaction or non-enzymatic glycation. So here's a way to think about it. You can roast your meat at 375 degrees for an hour, or you can roast your meat at 98.6 degrees for 75 years. The answer is the same. You're browning. You're browning right now as we speak. It is the aging process. There's nothing you can do about it, except there is. You can slow it down, but you can't get rid of it. The only way to get rid of it is to be dead. And here's the proof of the Maillard reaction in real life. Here is newborn rib cartilage, nice and white. And here's 88-year-old rib cartilage, nice and brown. Okay, you are browning as we speak. And if you had orange juice this morning, you are browning 7 times faster. And the faster you brown, the quicker you die. The reason this happens is because glucose, the energy of life, the stuff in all of our carbohydrate, has an aldehyde group here on it. And this aldehyde is very reactive, and it will react to epsilon amino groups of lysine on, say, the hemoglobin molecule. And when they bind, they form what's known as a shift base, and then they spontaneously decomposes. And now you end up with this covalent linkage, which is unbreakable. And this causes damage. And this is called the Amadori reaction or the Maillard reaction. And that causes disease by itself because it makes the proteins less stable and not able to do their job inside the cell. The second process, which goes along with glycation, is called oxidative stress. You all know about oxidative stress because you all know what a rusty nail looks like. Okay, that's oxygen interacting with iron. Well, oxygen interacts with other things too. And when it does, it makes bad stuff. It makes these things called carbonyls down here at the bottom right. Okay, I'm having some trouble with my cursor, apologize. Okay, and when you get those, you end up causing protein and lipid damage. And what does it? Well, glucose does it. As you can see here, there's a glucose molecule, and also fructose does it, the sweet molecule in sugar. Okay, all of these are involved in making this oxidative stress. And the oxidative stress creates what's known as an oxygen radical. This is what, for instance, hydrogen peroxide does when you put it on your skin and it bubbles up. And that's great if you're trying to kill bacteria. But imagine that bubbling up going on inside your cells. That's what you're trying to stop, what you're trying to quench. And the only way to do that is with antioxidants. And where do you get the antioxidants from? Real food. Number 3, mitochondrial dysfunction. Now, the mitochondria are the little energy burning factories inside your cell. Now, it turns out glucose makes mitochondria work better, as you can see here with the up arrow. Okay, and it actually induces an enzyme that makes the mitochondria work better. On the other hand, fructose, that sweet molecule in sugar, makes the mitochondria work worse. And you see the down red arrow. Okay, sorry, whoops. You see the down red arrow. Turns out that, sorry, I'm having trouble with my cursor. I'm trying to fix it while we're talking. Turns out Ron Kahn, the CEO of Joslin Diabetes Center in Boston, said this about his study that showed this. The most important takeaway of the study is that high fructose in the diet is bad, said Dr. Kahn. It's not bad because it's more calories, but because its effects on liver metabolism makes it worse at burning fat. As a result, adding fructose to the diet makes the liver store more fat. Remember fatty liver? And this is bad for the liver and bad for whole body metabolism. So sugar is a mitochondrial suppressor. And you get mitochondrial dysfunction by consuming sugar because of these effects on how the mitochondria work. Number 4, insulin resistance. Now, this is when insulin doesn't work well. When insulin doesn't work well, then bad things happen all over your body because insulin drives various toxic reactions, like, for instance, coronary vascular smooth muscle proliferation drives cancer. Now, you'll notice here's BMI on the x-axis against insulin resistance on the y-axis. And you'll notice that at any given BMI, you will be more insulin resistant than at a lower BMI. That's true. But again, within any given BMI, you could be at the bottom of the curve or at the top of the curve. So BMI in and of itself does not tell you whether or not you are insulin resistant or insulin sensitive. And in fact, you can be obese, BMI over 30 in the black bars, and still have a relatively low incidence of diabetes, as you can see on the left panel. Okay, and if you look at the right panel, you can see that obesity, OB versus, say, non-obesity, NOB, okay, is not the distinguishing feature of who dies. The distinguishing feature of who dies is whether you're insulin resistant or insulin sensitive. If you're insulin resistant, you die whether you're obese or not. So insulin resistance is the reason why people think obesity is the problem. It's not. It's the insulin resistance. We showed in a study here in San Francisco, when we took 43 children with insulin resistance, with metabolic syndrome, who are high sugar consumers. We studied them on their home diet. And then for the next 9 days, we catered their meals to be no added sugar. We took the sugar out of their diet. Now, if you do that, you're going to lose about 350 to 400 calories out of the diet, in which case, over a course of 10 days, patients might lose weight. So we didn't want them to lose weight, because if they lost weight and they got better, people would say, well, of course they got better, they lost weight. We wanted them to stay the same weight. So if we're going to take all the sugar out of their diet, then what we have to do is we have to replace it with something that's equicaloric, that has just as many calories as sugar. We gave him starch. So in the vernacular, we took the pastries out, we put the bagels in. We took the chicken teriyaki out, we put the turkey hot dogs in. We took the sweetened yogurt out, we put the baked potato chips in. Okay, so we didn't give him good food, we gave him crappy food. We gave him processed food. We gave him kid food, food kids would eat, but it was no added sugar food. We gave him a scale, and every day we'd say, what'd you weigh? And if they were losing weight, we said, eat more, in order to keep their weight constant over the course of the 10 days. And what we showed was that at baseline, these patients had loads of fat in their liver. That's why you can see the color. And after 9 days of taking the sugar out of their diet, their liver fat went down. The rate of liver fat making in the liver went down. The triglyceride in their bloodstream went down, their visceral fat went down, and most importantly, their pancreases started making insulin properly. We reversed their metabolic disease in 10 days just by taking sugar out of their diet, not calories. This has nothing to do with calories. Calories are not the issue. The issue is insulin. Insulin is the issue. And when you fix the insulin, the patient gets better. But we're not fixing the insulin. And we're spending all this time on the calories, and it ain't working. Wonder why? Well, here's why this is true. So this is complicated, and I'm going to make it very simple. Insulin binds to its receptor here in dark blue at the top. Okay, but what you will see is that after that dark insulin receptor, that IR, there are two pathways. One's in blue, one's in kind of red. The blue pathway is the metabolic part of insulin action, and it's for the most part good because it keeps glucose down, which is good. I'm not even suggesting that's bad. That's good. But you see the pink or the red pathway that leads to RNA, DNA synthesis and cell growth? That causes long-term damage. That ends up making you sick with metabolic syndrome. And you cannot dissociate those two pathways. Every time you hit a cell with insulin, you get both effects. So it's short-term gain for long-term pain. So the more insulin you have, the sicker you are and the quicker you die, and probably the fatter you get. Not always, but sometimes. All right, number 5, membrane integrity. The composition of the membranes surrounding the cell determine fluidity, that is, whether or not the cell is distensible, kind of like a balloon. Okay, and the degree of fluidity determines whether the cell is permeable or impermeable, and that's important for being able to get nutrients in and get waste products out. Omega-3s are particularly important for membrane integrity, and we have very few of them in our diet because you only get them from fish. So here's the composition of a normal plasma membrane, and what you'll notice is that phosphatidyl'inositol and phosphatidylserine and phosphatidylcholine are an important part, those phospholipids. Well, you know where you get the phospho from? You get it from dairy. But we've taken all the fat out of the dairy, so we're not getting the phosphos. Okay, and you'll notice different cell structures have different compositions, and we are actually depriving ourselves of the things that we need because we have processed the good stuff out of the food. And fructose in particular on the right, okay, drives insulin, and insulin causes problems with membrane fluidity, which are only reversed by omega-3 fatty acids, which you can see at the top. So omega-3s are super important because they repair neurons, they repair cells all over your body in terms of membranes. But omega-3s are in very short supply in a processed food diet. And the reason? Because number one, they go rancid, and number two, they have a fishy taste. And so the processed food industry doesn't want to have anything to do with them. Number 6, inflammation. Now, this is an intestine, and the intestine, as you may have heard, is a barrier. It's anything inside the intestine is actually outside your body, because the intestine basically acts like your skin inside your body, keeping stuff out, only letting certain things through. Well, turns out when your intestine is inflamed, which certain foodstuffs do, especially sugar, but others too, like gluten. Though the barrier breaks down, these tight junctions, which are depicted here, actually open up, and they allow stuff from the inside of the intestine to enter into your bloodstream and cause inflammation. And when you get inflammation, then you end up with metabolic disease as well. And you can see that here. The fructose is entering from the intestine into the liver and activating all of these inflammatory processes. Number 7, we're almost done. Epigenetics or methylation. So in the upper left, you can see what's a cytosine, a C, of the ACTG of DNA. Okay, that's C is cytosine. And what you'll see next to it is a methylated cytosine, and it's a methyl group, a CH3 added to it. Okay, and what that does in certain places in the DNA, in the genome, is actually stop transcription, stops the manufacture of proteins. There's a particularly important enzyme that is very relevant to heart disease and fatty liver disease, and it is called MTHFR, methyl tetrahydrofolate reductase, and it is very dependent on this methylation process. When it is blocked, you end up with heart disease, you end up with increased homocysteine levels. In the brain, if you block this phenomenon, basically you can actually inactivate some of the effects on weight control, and you can end up with an obese mouse, as you can see on the left here, compared to the other. So this idea of being able to stop transcription of the DNA because you've basically added a roadblock or a stop sign inside the genome through this phenomenon called methylation. And lastly, number 8, we're almost done, autophagy. And the best way to explain autophagy is garbage night. Okay, every week you take your garbage and you put it out on your street, and the garbage man comes and takes it away. Thank God. What if the garbage men go on strike? And Memphis knows about this. What happens? Okay, at some point the garbage backs up and starts causing problems inside the house. Okay, because you can't get rid of it. So you have to be able to get rid of the garbage. And that is a process called autophagy, where the cell actually finds stuff that's not usable anymore, like old spent mitochondria and old and spent membrane, pieces of membrane, and actually gets rid of them. And there are processes that take care of this for us in the cell. And unfortunately, when they fail, you end up with all sorts of problems, including diabetes and cancer. Okay. So there are our hateful or grateful 8, depending on what you're eating. Turns out those 8 are all driven negatively, or all inhibited in bad ways by processed food, ultra-processed food, which now account for 62% of food purchases in America and over 50% of food purchases in the UK. So what is processed food? Well, it has to be mass produced, consistent batch to batch, consistent country to country, specialized ingredients from specialized companies. All the macronutrients have to be pre-frozen. And in order to do that means you have to get rid of the fiber. And a lot of times the fiber is where the micronutrients hang out. Has to stay emulsified so the fat and water don't separate. So when you stick the microwave lasagna in the microwave, it doesn't layer out. And it finally has to have long shelf or freezer life. Okay, that's what the food engineers are worried about. What are we doctors worried about? 3 things too little, 8 things too much. Not enough fiber. Turns out fiber is super important, all by itself. And fiber is not for you, it's for your bacteria, it's for your microbiome, to make that inflammation in your intestine better. Omega-3 fatty acids, which are found in wild fish. And we talked about omega-3s. They are anti-inflammatory. They improve membrane integrity. Micronutrients. So these are all the things that travel along with the fiber fraction, the vitamins, the minerals, etc. And finally, 8 things too much. Too many trans fats. Now we know that, and they're coming out of the diet, so that's good. Hooray for that. Branched chain amino acids. So this is what's in protein powder. This is what bodybuilders use to bulk up. And if you're a bodybuilder, you need them because that's what makes muscle. But if you're not a bodybuilder, what happens to them? Any place to store them? No. So what happens to them? They go to the liver. The liver takes the amino group off. They become organic acids. They flood your mitochondria, and you end up with the mitochondrial dysfunction we talked about before. Omega-6 fatty acids. These are pro-inflammatory fatty acids. These are the precursors to arachidonic acid, which are the things that cause inflammation. They also cause pain. Food additives, food dye number this, food additive number that, that's easy, cancer, what have you. Emulsifiers, I mentioned before. What are emulsifiers? They're detergents. They hold fat and water together. So what happens if you swallow a detergent? The mucin layer on the inside of your intestine gets stripped away. And that means that the bacteria can actually cause that leaky gut that I talked about, which leads to inflammation and things passing across and causing problems at the liver. Salt, excess salt. And turns out salt is important for about 15 to 20% of the population. That's a lot, but it's not 80, it's not 100%. A lot of people can excrete their salt, but the more insulin resistant you are, the less well you can excrete it. So you got to get the insulin down. Getting the insulin down, then the salt wouldn't matter. And nitrates get turned into nitrosoureas in your colon, and that's what causes colon cancer. And finally, the big kahuna, the one that blows everything else out of the water, sugar. And sugar has all sorts of bad things. Of the 600,000 items in the American food supply, 74% of them are spiked with added sugar, whereas only 50% of them have too much salt. So sugar is the marker for processed food. If you see sugar on a label, it is ultra processed. And processed food increases weight, as you can see here in Europe. Here are 19 countries, and processed food on the x-axis and prevalence of obesity on the y-axis. And ultra processed food makes your mitochondria not work as well because you can't burn it, you end up storing it instead. This is a study done at the NIH where they gave people the same number of calories in either processed food or not processed food. And it turned out that with the processed food, they gained weight on the same number of calories because they weren't burning it because their mitochondria weren't working so well. And processed food increases your risk for cancer. As you can see here, the fourth quartile in the bottom right, okay? Higher, every 10% increase in processed food leads to an increase of 12% in cancer. And also with mortality. So bottom line, processed food, bad guy. Now, people are all concerned about this low carb versus low fat business. Turns out it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Christopher Gardner at Stanford University, colleague of mine, did a study where basically he put people on either healthy low carb diets or healthy low fat diets, and they lost equal amounts of weight. But they all lost weight. And the reason they all lost weight was not because it was low carb or low fat, it was because it was healthy, because they got rid of the processed food. Everybody ate real food. Real food led to weight loss. And it didn't matter if it was a high fat based diet or a high carb based diet. The thing that didn't lead to weight loss was processed food. So what's in processed food? Well, sugar. And that's where the sugar is. 1/3 of sugar in basically beverages, 1/6 in things that are like desserts, candy, ice cream, etc. But there's sugar in virtually everything else, like yogurt, barbecue sauce, potato chips, hamburger buns, hamburger meat, etc. So you basically, if you're buying food with a label, it's a warning label because it's processed. Real food doesn't have a label. Ever notice? There's no label on broccoli. There's no label on radishes. There's no label on meat. Okay? And the reason is because it's not processed. So processed food is high sugar, low fiber. Real food is low sugar or high fiber. Fiber turns out to be important all by itself. And the reason is because it feeds the microbiome. The more fiber you take in on the x-axis, the better your all-cause mortality, the better your heart disease, the better your type 2 diabetes, the better your cancer Bottom line, fiber is good. One of the reasons fiber is good is because your bacteria turn fiber into short chain fatty acids, which are anti-inflammatory. Bill Gates even is excited about fiber and investing in fiber companies. The problem is we're supposed to be consuming 50 grams of fiber a day, and we consume less than 12. And the reason is because processed food takes the fiber out of our diet. And what you can see here, and this is really important, on the right, you can see the glucose excursions in diabetics fed a low-carb diet. Now take a look at the left. This is the glucose excursion in diabetics fed a high-fiber diet. You'll notice that the high-fiber diet does just about as good a job at keeping glucose down as the low-carb diet does. And the reason is because the fiber prevents absorption in the early intestine, keeping the blood glucose down. So if it doesn't get absorbed, that means it's there for the bacteria. You're feeding your gut. And that's the definition of real food. Protect the liver, feed the gut. Fiber, it does it. So here are your grateful 8. Glycation, it's about carbohydrate, sugar, lack of fiber. Oxidative stress is about sugar. Mitochondrial dysfunction is about sugar, omega-6s, trans fats, lack of micronutrients. Insulin resistance is about sugar and branched chain amino acids. Membrane instability is about lack of omega-3s. Inflammation is about carbohydrate or gluten. Omega-6s, sugar, and lack of fiber. Epigenetics or methylation is about lack of folic acid. And autophagy is about how frequently you feed and lack of fiber. In other words, it's the food. It's always been the food. It's not about the medicine. It's about the food. Proof. Here we have our sugar consumption over the last 200 years. And you'll notice in the 1800s, we had the growth of the sugar industry, C&H, Domino, Texas, Louisiana, Hawaii, which reached stabilization in the early 1920s when price equaled demand. There's the rationing of World War II. Came up to the same level afterwards. And there's the advent of processed food in about 1965. Okay, and you see what happens since. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to superimpose the percent of GDP in America spent on healthcare in the same period of time. What do you see? When processed food entered our world, that's when healthcare costs started to go berserk. And the reason is because of the Hateful 8. We are now poisoning ourselves with our food. So everyone says food is medicine. Not quite. This, I have to say, is what is going on. And this is very important for this summit, because the food system, you're talking about food systems today. Well, you know what? The food system's only as good as the food. So if a food system's putting this stuff in people's hands, what good do you think you're doing? So you have to think not just about how to get the food to people, you have to determine what is the food you're getting to people. This is not nutritious. It says donating nutritious food to the food bank. No, it's not. Okay, this is actually poison. Everything on here. And the reason it's poison is because it doesn't protect the liver and it doesn't feed the gut. It is dangerous. Our nonprofit is very interested in this problem. It's called Eat Real, and we have issued this alert about nutrition during COVID-19. And I will, right now, all the government is telling us or not telling us is masking, social distancing, and hand washing. We think they have screwed up. We think they have missed the most important leg of the stool, of the four-legged stool, and that is food. Because real food actually increases your chances of surviving COVID-19, because real food reverses the insulin resistance, and the insulin is one of the things that drives COVID-19 infectivity and morbidity and mortality. And this is all outlined in this, and it's all, this report is online at our website, eatreal.org. And I will give it to Pedro, and perhaps he can distribute it to the entire audience. So I'm now close. Hippocrates famously said, "Let thy food be thy medicine." Yeah, but Hippocrates never met a McDonald's. Hippocrates was never an orange mound. Okay. What Hippocrates really meant to say was good food is medicine, bad food needs medicine. Okay. Just because food is called food doesn't make it food. As Michael Pollan called it, edible food-like substances. In fact, processed food is not food. Processed food is poison. Real food is food. And the problem is we have to figure out food systems that deliver real food to people, not processed food to people, in order to have to evidence improved metabolic health, improved healthcare, improved societal flourishing and wellness and well-being. So with that, I thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Dr. Lustig, for that really informative presentation. And we did get some questions that I am pulling up. Okay, first one I am seeing here. Does fast weight loss through surgery, such as gastric sleeves, help?
So gastric sleeves or other forms of bariatric surgery do reduce the danger to the liver. And the reason is because you are basically delivering, you're basically bypassing the duodenum. And the duodenum is where simple carbohydrates and sugars get absorbed. The question is whether or not that's a good idea. And what we have shown and other people have shown, in fact, the Swedish obesity study has shown, is that if you change people from processed food to real food and they stick to it, they do as well as patients who get bariatric surgery. Now, if you can't get them to change their diet, then the bariatric surgery is much more effective. But if you can get them to change, actually changing the food is much more effective and much less dangerous long term. So it is completely dependent on the food you give them. The bad news also about bariatric surgery is that about 1/3 of the patients who get bariatric surgery 18 months later start gaining their weight back. And the reason is because they never changed their food. So the bariatric surgery really only works as an adjunct to real food change in the first place. So yes, it works, but it doesn't work great. And it only works as long as the food changed anyway. So you have to consider bariatric surgery an adjunct, not a primary therapy.
Okay. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Thank you. We've got another one here. Could you say more about taking sugar out of schools? What has been done so far and what more needs to be done there?
So our nonprofit has been working with the Mount Diablo Unified School District for 3 years. And what they have done, so in schools, you have to understand, schools are the largest fast food franchise in the entire country. Okay, that is what schools are. And the reason this has happened is because schools have taken their food manufacturing processes out of the schools. Okay, they have basically outsourced it to Cisco or to McDonald's in many cases, et cetera. And one of the reasons was to recoup infrastructure to turn the cafeteria into classrooms because they needed extra space for student teaching. So schools don't have any capacity to be able to manufacture food, lunches, breakfast or lunches for the kids. So basically they are now processed food purveyors. They are the largest the fast food franchise in the country. So what we did at the Mount Diablo Unified School District was we put into place a reversal of that by doing the following. Dominic Mackey, who is head of food procurement services for Mount Diablo, is a very visionary guy. And we worked with him. And what Mount Diablo did was they purchased a centralized food manufacturing facility, okay, for the entire district. And every day that food manufacturing facility makes 27,000 meals from scratch. And then those 27,000 meals get apportioned to the 27 schools in the district. So basically they have taken the food production off-site, but every kid gets a home-cooked meal from a centralized kitchen. And by doing that, we can control what's in it. And by doing so, we have been able to remove the 270,000 pounds of sugar. This is actually relatively cheap to do. It's actually cheaper than relying on Cisco or McDonald's for the food in schools. It also actually helps satisfy the National School Breakfast Program and the National School Lunch Program directives even better than they do. So we have been able to put these into place. The bad news is that we were not able to study it because that would have required a clinical research protocol and lab drawing and stuff like that. That was, sort of a bridge too far for the Mount Diablo School District. So we don't have that. But my colleagues at UCSF, we put together in 2015 a sugared beverage ban on campus. So at UCSF, if you come to UCSF today, you cannot find a Coke. They are not allowed. Not for the patients, not for the visitors, not for the faculty, not for the workers, nowhere. You cannot find a sugared beverage on campus. And so we studied that back when it was initiated. And what we found was over the course of 1 year that total soda consumption had been cut in half, and waist circumference went down and insulin sensitivity improved. So we were able to show by putting this workplace ban in place, we were able to show metabolic benefits for the workers, for our employees. And the assumption is if you did that in schools, the kids would get better too.
Okay, great. And we only have time for one more question, but
By the way, if anybody in Memphis, if the school system wants to work with Eat Real, we are here for you. All you have to do is give me a call or go online at eatreal.org, and our CEO, Nora, will be on the phone with you in half a second.
okay, great. I took that down, and everything is being recorded along with the chat today. So we are going to ask one more question, but Dr. Lustig, would you mind if we emailed you the rest of the questions that we've gotten in, and maybe on your own time you could answer them and we could email those responses back to everyone?
Sure.
Okay, great. So one last question. We have people here today from various sectors, including insurance, city and county government, universities, healthcare, nonprofit, agriculture, etc. Are you familiar with any collaborations like this that you recommend we reference to develop effective and self-sustaining programs?
Yes, and it's the startup I mentioned at the front end. It's called Foogal, F-O-O-G-A-L. You can find it online. What it is it's a digital platform that allows people using their own biochemical profile, which lives online, that's worked out with their doctor, to be able to order food, decide what they want to make, access recipes that will actually fit their particular biochemical profile, order the food, have it delivered, and the bill go to the insurance company. And the insurance company, if you're listening, okay, the cost of real food is less than 1/10 the cost of the medicine. And you can get people off their medicine by getting them to eat real food. And we've already shown that. I've shown that in our own work, in our own studies. And now I'm working with a group, a healthcare system in Philadelphia called Simplex Health, that has been able to get people off medicine, gestational diabetics off medicine, by basically just getting them real food. And guess what, insurance companies? You get to keep the difference. Which would you rather pay for? Would you rather pay for the food, which is 1/10 the cost, and have your patients get better? Obamacare says you can only have a 15% profit margin. Okay. So maybe Obamacare will disappear next week and maybe you won't care. But if you do care, which would you rather do? Would you rather have a patient who's better and where you paid for the food, which is 1/10 the cost of the medicine, or would you rather have a patient who's on medicine that you have to pay for, who's going to get sicker and sicker and you're going to have to keep paying for it? So if you're interested in this, concept of being able to get real food to people and instead of them being on medicine, okay, we have the solution for you.
Okay, great. Thank you, Dr. Lustig. Hey everyone, welcome back. I hope that you all had some great conversation. I know our group was really productive and we weren't able to tackle all of the questions, but we also kind of realized that a lot of them were interrelated. So we're going to have the note takers share out, or the facilitator if you're in my group. And I'm just going to go down the groups and call them out. Remember one takeaway. And we can start with group one. What was your biggest takeaway?
Yes, so I was the note taker for group one. I think my biggest takeaway from our conversation was that there are a lot of different fields that relate to this work, but one of the biggest things that's missing in Memphis is work on a policy level. And so we had a lot of discussion about like real steps that we could take to move things more into like a city structure, and then the policies that we would like to advocate for.
Group two.
Group two talked a lot about just the ways that we could overcome barriers to folks being able to modify behaviors and make better food choices. So we really talked about how it all involves so much of our cultures of origin, as well as access, and that healthy food and a healthy lifestyle almost needs like a marketing plan in order to really get folks on board at a level that allows them to keep up with new habits. We also talked about just different ways that organizations could partner with each other to create jobs, to create more accessibility for folks, just kind of brainstorming how different organizations could bring to the table their resources to share around with one another.
Okay, great. Yeah, that was one of the hopes that we had today for this summit. So that's awesome. Group three.
So we also just focused our conversation mainly on the socioeconomic barriers and some of the experience that people had with these populations in food insecure communities. We had Erica with Big Green, Sarah Blackburn with Community Gardens as well, and then Tawana Whitlock just talk a lot about, with United Way, talk a lot about making sure that whatever we do is important, that we take into account solutions that people are familiar with, taking into account foods that people are familiar with, instead of trying to change their behaviors so drastically. And that some of the barriers that have people is not just on getting them access to it, but on getting them to choose the foods and know what to do with them, and how we can build education and incentivize some of the consumption of the foods. I think those are the two main takeaways, is to take into account what are people familiar with and what are they most receptive to integrating into their day-to-day, and then how can we get them educated on what to do with the products once they have access to them.
Yeah, some of that came up in our group as well. Okay, group four, I think we're on.
Hi, I was with group 4, and we had a whole lot of different expertise in our group, everything from policy and education to interest in jobs and local agriculture. So one of our big takeaways was wondering how to balance good systems with local empowerment. We had a lot of fun ideas when we talked about schools being able to have something like garden teams compete over growing big vegetables, ways to really energize the discussion around nutritional food. And like Pedro's group said, repeated exposure was important, and getting to them even before high school. One of our group members, Danielle, teaches at a high school, and she's like, well, their habits are pretty well formed. So getting in there early, making it appealing, and realizing, as another of our group members said, that we are surrounded by growers. We live in the Delta. We should be able to do this and get healthy food, local food in through the school systems. That's where we focused a lot of our energy.
Okay, thanks, Heidi. Group 5, can you give us your takeaway?
Sure. We talked a lot about logistics and a lack of access to healthy food. Some suggestions really kind of tied in that question to number 5 with job creation, and again, sort of like incentivizing a more equitable and healthy food system. And also just like kind of on the ground level, maybe churches could utilize buses to distribute food from grocery stores to elderly folks in the community. But, a huge focus was on job creation, both for youth and adults, and how that could really kind of energize a lot of different folks to be excited about the real food movement.
I'm loving all of the solutions and ideas everybody's presenting, so thank you. Group 6.
Yes, so group 6 also focused on logistics, and many of the members of the group were speaking as people who have been distributing food particularly over the last 6 months, but even before that. And our conversation fell into sort of two pieces. One is around storage and refrigeration, and the other is around sites for food distribution, whether that's prepared meals or perishable foods, and concerns about how to package out or freeze or get food out in a timely manner. And we thought about identified some assets and resources that we might be able to use or expand use of, including houses of faith, businesses, particularly food preparation or food sales sorts of businesses that have large refrigerators, or the food bank that has refrigerated food storage, and nonprofit organizations who do food preparation and food storage. Are there ways to partner in order to have temporary food storage space, so that that agencies could actually increase the amount of food delivery that they can do, because not having refrigerated storage space is a barrier. And then the second, around these same assets, houses of faith, businesses, nonprofit organizations, are thinking about how these can be sites of food distribution, both for prepared and for fresh foods. So one of the examples was using a major site like Walmart, where lots of people shop, to actually hand out food, because people will already be going to those sites, and sort of increase the outreach of being able to distribute food in the community.
Great, thanks, Catherine. Okay, breakout group 7.
Hey, so in group 7, we had a great conversation with a lot of people from different agencies that are actually directly involved in food distribution and education. And so that's really what we focused on, was the fact that, Memphis has pretty good logistical networks in place in a lot of cases, but we think a lot of the disconnect kind of comes down to food waste and food education. Like, we get this great box of beautiful produce, but do we know what to do with it beyond frying it? And are we just not preparing it because generationally, I didn't grow up eating this, so I don't know how to cook it. I don't know what it should look like or taste like or feel like. And the ways that we can kind of, mitigate food waste just by increasing knowledge and awareness of how to use that food and what it's good for and why. And incentivizing the purchase of produce, because like so much of our work in this area is grant funded, and what happens when that grant runs out, and how do we create change? And we think that a great solution is just fundamentally teaching people how to use food, teaching people how to understand that it doesn't necessarily have to be perfect looking to be good for you and good food. And just in the families and in the communities, just teaching and learning, how we can nourish our bodies with food once we get it, basically.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Emily. Yeah, I'm seeing people respond back to what you're saying. I think there are a lot of socioeconomic challenges that play into that, how to prepare the food, if you have time to prepare the food. So definitely larger issues around that, but education certainly. Breakout group 8.
Excellent. Hi, everyone. So we talked about some of those things too, definitely the socioeconomic piece. And we kind of looked at different elements of the different questions. We started out talking a lot about food waste and how there's a lot of solutions there to solving food insecurity and even creating jobs, but that was not the only solution. Just thinking about food access and people's ability for transportation. And now, given COVID-19, there are older adults and families who shouldn't be going out to a pantry. And so figuring out ways to address that. And we talked a little bit about the nutrition safety net programs like SNAP and WIC and the child nutrition programs. And ultimately, we said there needs to really be a comprehensive approach to achieving a solution that looks at maybe a few issues within each of those questions. So that's kind of where we felt we had a really great discussion as well.
Thanks, Signe. Yeah, I'm seeing lots of people bringing up the comprehensive idea of reaching across all of the networks and distribution and logistical spaces in Memphis that exist, but how do they work together and kind of reach across the table? So today is definitely an opportunity to make some of those connections if you haven't already. Breakout group number 9.
So yeah, to go off of what you actually just said, Angelica, kind of we focus on discussing socioeconomic barriers as well as logistical challenges, and our takeaway is that we need a comprehensive vision for what we do want to accomplish here in Memphis, and then kind of discussing that vision, that it needs to be backed up with data and an acknowledgement of intersectionality of the issues present, which is what a lot of people have already been mentioning, and a plan that leverages community assets such as faith centers, nonprofits, schools, and available land. So incorporating spaces for community gardening and future urban residential developments was a suggestion of, if we're going to be developing things in Memphis, making space for that. And we also focused heavily on the need for good marketing and communication when we're rolling out programs. I think that we all came to a consensus that that's a struggle in Memphis. So doing outreach and doing it well in Memphis is needed to accomplish an initiative that's overarching and figuring out how to do that well.
Yes, completely agree. Thank you. Breakout group 10.
Hi, everybody. We had a good discussion, and breakout group 10 started tackling the question around jobs, and certainly recognize that many of the organizations doing this work rely heavily on volunteers. And so even as a short-term job solution, creating ways to stabilize some of that volunteer workforce with stipends or some sort of payment model, that because we believe that volunteer only staffing can be a limiting factor with just how much can be done. But also taking into account the opportunity to invest in the communities that are most impacted by food insecurity when we look at job creation, so that we are also dealing or trying to impact financial strain and financial insecurity at the same time. But just as already been said, we quickly moved into the need for some sort of funded, centralized collaboration agency, center, role that can do multiple things, but that collective voice among our organizations might be a more effective way to get funding for that model. It also can help bring a collective voice to real solutions that need attention. We use the role that the Joint Task Force has played in responding to COVID, which has truly been, food has definitely been part of it. Kathy Pope is at the table. Healthcare is a part of it. Transportation's a part of it. All of the government, mayor, leadership, everybody, because we all understood our health was related to our neighbor's health, and that was without question. How do we get that same kind of understanding when it comes to food, that the health of the food that my neighbor can eat and does eat impacts my health and my family's future? So that collective voice and collective strategy can both advocate for short-term solutions. You know, we got to fix the car while we're driving it down the highway, but also be able to build a roadmap to the long-term strategy and solutions that we need. And so we think there may be models out there already. We don't have to create this from scratch. One idea that was brought up was looking at things like Keep America Beautiful, not even in the food sector, but that is like this nested model that goes from a very local level all the way up to a national level. Or are there other food related models in communities that have been successful that we need to be looking at? So we have some evidence that this works and we might be able to get some attention for it.
I think long-term sustainability of all of our programs, right, that we represent from across the board, but then if there was a central organization or program that kind of helped to solve some of these issues we're discussing today, long-term funding would definitely be important, along with job security, right, and not just having volunteers is also important. So thanks for bringing that up. Group 11.
Yeah, so for group 11, we kind of focused more so on the education piece and kind of starting from there, starting with especially the kids and how it was brought up before of if we start educating them even before high school and throughout all of school, that would be the best. And especially in terms of being very hands-on, especially with like nutrition classes or other classes that maybe are a requirement throughout the duration of school, just for them to be more hands-on and to look like and to start that appeal early of this is what they, rather than kind of masking flavor with additional sodium and bacon grease and making our food more southern than maybe it needs to be, and especially having those options at school. And I think also just starting with the families and as well as educating the kids. But if the families, when they come home, if they're eating that same food again and the parents are not educated, then it's this whole cycle of maybe we help the kids in school, but then they come back home and it's the same issue. So kind of starting through there and how we already have those implementations at Church Health with nutritional classes, but really looking into how we can further that cause, but also even just being in these groups, connections with, I know a couple members that we had just talking about their different schools and public schools and charter schools and how they can kind of get on the same page with programs even such as LifeDoc and how to help kids that may be at risk and help just eradicate chronic illnesses while we can, starting in the schools.
Awesome. Thanks, Holly. Breakout group 12.
Hey, yeah, breakout group number 12. We had a great conversation. We touched upon all of these things that y'all have shared up to group 1 through 11, but mainly we focused on logistics and the importance for education, and what it brought us to was the need for collaboration, and how do we all come together, find out who's doing what, where they're doing it, so we're not overlapping and groups are doing the same sort of work and services. The need for an asset map was discussed, and then it all falls into the need for funding as well, for staffing, for transportation, because again, the issues are around access. That was what we started with. I mean, the main thing that we focused on in the first 15 minutes was access and what are all the barriers. So, but I do think out of our group, what we really kind of focused on towards the end was a robust access map that everyone would have access to and everyone would have a seat at the table for. So thanks.
Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, I'm really looking forward to reading everybody's suggestions and ideas for collaboration afterwards as well, with all of the notes from the breakout groups. So I think there will be some things that hopefully when emailed out, all of the notes, if you are so inclined to reach out to your neighbor or an organization, or maybe offer a way to be part of the solution, we are definitely going to be looking forward to continuing these discussions, but also moving into solution and strategy phase. So today was only the beginning. So group 13.
Hi, everyone. Like everyone that has met, who have gone before, group 13 really focused on logistics, education, culture, as well as how do we communicate with one another and collaborate with one another. What I thought was really beautiful was that everyone in the group were from a different sector, from the private sector in the restaurant industry, some within Shelby County government, within city government, the schools, and even congregations were represented. And so the conversation is, how do we create a system that works together with all the different sectors that are addressing food insecurity in Memphis? And thinking about this in a strength-based approach, what assets we are currently have in the community that can help address food insecurity and also be culturally relevant in the neighborhoods. I think one of the things that was mentioned before is that, what about the mom and pop shops that are already there? How can those shops can support the infrastructure of the food system in Memphis and address food insecurity? Let's see. So I think those are the biggest themes that were communicated. And of course, bringing communities to the table, like who's at the table is not just the stakeholders, but also the members who will be on the other side. So how can we work together to make sure that food insecurity is addressed by all people and not just the ones that are creating this and making the decisions?
Thanks, Andrea, and good to see you. Group 14.
Group 14, okay. So we also centered around education as well. And of course, we looked at the challenges as access, education. We also named convenience as a challenge, right? The convenience of unhealthy foods. Of course, the poverty was the root cause. When we started talking about solutions and ideas, it wasn't necessarily about education happening. We feel like education's happening. So that's been a trend of what we've heard today. We feel like education's happening in silos and that people are unaware of that. So one of the solutions for that was, how do we do a brand and influence campaign, which we've heard. That conversation went a step deeper, actually, to make sure that if that is something that's lifted from the work, how do we make sure that that also supports the other social health determinants in terms of economics? And then who are we lifting up in the branding? So one of the things that we touched on at the end was how race, power, and privilege are a root cause of a lot of these. And that when we're doing the branding, that's a solution, right? In terms of how we lift up specific examples. So in embodying that, like Karen, our group had Ann Squared, Hogan, and that's Hogan and Langston, Karen Minnis, Fedoria, Steffi, Richmond, Melissa, and Allison, and Aaliyah. But it was Karen Minnis from Orange Mound who's doing this work of urban agriculture. And we started naming like some of the local examples that are doing it. And that became really exciting. And we started talking about the challenges in terms of infrastructure and then being able to have the resources to lift it up. And then also, them being able to have access to get to other places outside of their immediate community as well, so that they can bring those resources back in. So I think those were the main points. Oh, and we also lifted up how arts and culture, believe it or not, for those who know me, you would probably think this was my suggestion, but this wasn't. But how arts and culture can be a caveat or be a vehicle for communicating like that branding message, and that can also be a grassroots approach as well that helps to reinforce the efficacy of neighborhoods and allows for them to know that, hey, we see ourselves in this and we have all the solutions within our own neighborhoods. And that was it. Thanks, Angelica.
Thanks, Justin. I think that was an excellent point, bringing up how to make education relevant to the population here in Memphis, so that the education is actually reaching and being digested by the folks that are getting it. And I like that you also brought up the issue of convenience. I'm surprised, but I'll put this in there for the ears of everyone about convenience stores being a solution in some cities for food access, as well as looking and mapping the fast food locations around the city of Memphis, looking at where those are mostly prevalent, right, in certain parts of Memphis. And so that issue of convenience and when you are of lower income, how those work together to kind of make for some serious health issues, which Dr. Lustig also touched on. Do we have group 15? Was there? Okay, good.
It looks
Hi,
like
I'm Jeannie.
oh, yay.
Oh, Mia, do you want to go?
No, please,
Okay.
Jeannie, go right ahead.
We talked about food waste, and then number 3, the education and socioeconomic issues. Food waste, I think there were a lot of questions about what's going on around that. And so there are lots of solutions that are happening already in Memphis. And I think some education about what's going on around there would be really helpful. What is or isn't important about expiration dates, that kind of thing. And then the education piece, we talked more about access, and not just immediate access, but transportation and public transit, sidewalks, all that kind of stuff that make it possible for somebody to get to a place that sells healthy food. So there are, as you all mentioned, that cooking classes and the nutrition is out there, but if you can't physically get to the actual store, so yeah, that's about it for us.
Thanks, Jeannie. Yes, transportation is huge, and how it's related to food, not just through distribution of actual food, but getting food to folks or getting people to the food. So thanks for bringing that up. Okay, alrighty then. I want to thank all of you today for the awesome discussion and all of the ideas that were generated. I'm seeing a lot of discussion in the chat right now, and we're going to make sure we try to address all of the questions and ideas in our follow-up from today's meeting. We're a little bit ahead of schedule, but I do want to introduce Ms. Rashawn Austin of the Work CDC. So she is going to close us out today. And again, I want to just thank everybody for their time this morning.
Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you, Angelica. I'm just Rashawn from the Works Incorporated. And so I had this little speech I'm going to start with, but I was just capturing notes from all of the group discussions. And I'll get to that in a second. And starting with group one, which their synopsis was perfect. And I'll tell you why. This morning I was on an earlier call. Our local chapter of Urban Land Institute is doing a 4-part series on building a city we can all afford. And so you'll understand when I get to the point around what group one brought out. But I'll start with food is vital to our health and well-being, and yet humanity is still witnessing a struggle to produce, exchange, and eat the food we all need. Early humans built their communities around their ability to obtain food to sustain their lives. They did not seek out the roughest terrain or the most arid land from a water source that would not promote growth. They did just the opposite. They settled in deltas with sources of water, soil rich in nutrients, near grazing herds for the omnivores and carnivores. And so just talking a little bit about what the Works has done, fueled by an extensive resident-led planning effort, the South Memphis Revitalization Action Plan, a CDC, a community development corporation like the Works, got involved in some food work. Not because that's what we started out doing. We're housing developers. We landed in the food space because it's what the residents said was needed. And that theme about food access and security, and there are many people who were involved in this plan on this call, from the university, from people who were students at the time, and people who have remained our partners in this work. And so not unlike our forebears, we have to center many of our priorities around food access and security as we work to restore, rebuild, and renew our communities. And when we talk about our motto, we're not just talking about places, but about people. And so that kind of gets to the discussion that group one started. They focus on a policy level. One of the groups this morning that was talking about a very unique adaptive reuse of a synagogue in Pittsburgh, it wasn't just about that building, but they were talking about food systems and gardens and farms around that and every other thing that a community needs. Many times when I'm on a panel and we talk about community development, one of the things I did is I went back and researched how faith traditions, because at one point I was not only the president of the Works, but I was also the chief operating officer of St. Andrew at the same time. And so I wanted to look at what faith traditions thought about community and community development. And one of the traditions, Judaism, struck me, but I found the themes throughout Hinduism, Christianity. But Judaism specifically spelled out communities and what items or institutions were required to be present in order for the rabbi to exist in that place. And so it went on to talk about the blood letter, the faith institution, the school. And the one that we see more of is related to food because it sustains us. So it talks about the butcher and the baker. And so in terms of this policy level conversation, the group in Pittsburgh talked about a policy that they have in their local government. And I was so impressed. It has 4 P's. It's people, place, planet, and performance. And so we're talking about some of those things. We're of course talking about people and how we live better and we eat better foods and we live longer and have better quality of life. We're talking about the places, whether it's the buildings where we reside or the grocery stores where we shop for food at a retail level, or the gardens and the farms that we grow, where we grow our food, the planet. And so we talked a little bit about food waste, or a lot about food waste. I think all of the groups probably touched on food waste, and how we keep our planet going because of our way that we treat it. You know, we have a lot of issues with our planet today. and then even performance. And so we talk about, I'm thinking when they were talking, of course, they were talking about performance in terms of the numbers of the housing development. And so I'm thinking about industries that are food related, like the restaurant business. How do we keep our local restaurateurs alive? And our grocery. And I like to talk about grocery differently. You know, yes, we give out food, but we also operate a grocery that's always in the hole. And understanding, and it caused me, our work here caused me to have to do a lot of research, talking to grocery retailers from the largest in the nation, which is the Kroger stores, to our partner at a local level, the Castle Retail Groups, which operate Cash Saver stores and now High Point Grocery. So I learned a lot of things about performance when it comes to grocery stores and how we distribute food. I just started taking just a couple of words from each group, the cultural barriers, and we talked a little bit about that in group 7. Because what I find, and I'm an anthropologist, and I saw Catherine and some other anthropologists on the phone, Lindsay, and I don't want to name everybody, I'm sure, but I saw some anthropologists here. And a concept in anthropology and social science is cultural relativism. And very often we place our own practices and beliefs and cultural systems upon the heads of those people that we serve when we're in industries like the nonprofit and the public sector. But cultural relativism speaks to the idea of addressing those people from where they are. They're based on their own cultural standards and their own practices. And Justin stands out in group number 14 because he kind of started talking about a marketing campaign. And what I wrote was this myth busting campaign about convenience as a challenge. And so I see it as an opportunity, whether it's the stores, because if we look at larger cities that were built before Memphis, for instance, like New York, the bodega is the center of the communities. And it's where you get everything. They didn't have like a mega store like a Walmart where you could buy coats and rings and food, but it was where you could get most things. And next door to the bodega was a flower shop or a butcher and a baker. And so there was a center of activity, the marketplace of where humans bought food, but also speaking on the convenience side of preparation of that food. We have been led to believe that we don't have time to prepare food. And I just go back to those people who came before us, particularly in the Southern Agrarian Society, where we farmed all day from 5 a.m. or 4:30 a.m. to dusk, and we managed to have food without the presence of fast food or convenience stores. They did not exist. And so, I like groups of people or individuals who have food businesses who talk about food prep. And it's funny, one of our staff members was ill with COVID, and we wanted to provide him with some cooked food because he also had some other health conditions that he suffers with. And the thing that popped in my mind, I knew a lot of people that were in the business of food preparation, but there was this place that used to be associated or in the optometry college, Southern College of Optometry, and it moved to Cooper Street, and it was 2020. I think it was something like that, and they did food preparation. But they're gone during COVID. That business is now gone. And so I thought there is so much opportunity in vacant storefronts throughout distressed and declining neighborhoods for food prep businesses, so that we could buy our coworker food for a week so that he's eating as healthy as he needs to eat. But also he just has food to sustain him. Then I kind of talked about group 2 and a marketing plan and how we collaborate on a marketing plan to sell people on that you actually do have the time. I talked about in our group, we at our South Memphis Farmers Market during the season, we like to do demonstrations of locally grown produce. And so the Greenleaf Learning Farm run by Knowledge Quest had eggplant. Well, you have generations of people who don't know what to do with eggplant, that purple vegetable. They're like, I don't eat that. My mother didn't eat it. My grandmother didn't eat it. I don't want that. what does it taste like? It's disgusting. And so we had people of all ages, from children to a 79-year-old who said, I've never eaten eggplant. I'm not going to eat eggplant. And how long does it really take to cook it? So I went and got some eggplants from Greenleaf, and I cut them up. I washed them and cut them up, and I kept their stems so we can compost those. And I made eggplant pizza bites. And what parent doesn't go, and some adults alone, they don't have to be a parent, go to the grocery store and get pizza bites that they pop in the microwave as a convenient meal. It took all of 20 minutes to prepare eggplant pizza bites. And those people who said they would never touch an eggplant, I actually had to stop them from eating up all of the eggplant from their coworkers and other people in the neighborhood, because they found something that they never tasted before had a great taste. It was a quick meal. It was healthier because you just put it in the oven. And it was available to them during this season because they are here in Memphis. And so group 3, same thing about the socioeconomic barriers and the cultural relativism, because often with our food giveaways, we give people what's available. But even in my housing development, I think about what is it that I want to see and what is acceptable for me and my family. And so we need to provide those same type of accommodations to those we serve. And I know there are some limitations to that, particularly with the Mid-South Food Bank and how they obtain their food through grocery stores. But grocery stores and other donors, the wholesalers, need to partner with us in getting better food or the best food to those that we're trying to serve. And then teaching them, the education piece kept coming up about how to prepare those foods that they may not have ever seen before. You see boxes given away, and families go get 5 boxes in a week, especially during this period of the pandemic. And they find things in the boxes they've never eaten and they don't know how to prepare. And we have to also get away from this concept that fresh produce is our only out of people eating healthier. And so our work as a cohort of the Cooking Matters curriculum, we look at, and Brittany's on the phone, she's our food programs coordinator. We look at not only eating healthier, but we look at maximizing the food budget, is particularly around people who are low income, and minimizing waste. And we also talk about reading labels. And so there's Pig Sweet Farms who have freshly frozen. And so when it's out of season, that doesn't mean you stop eating it, you get it freshly frozen. Or if you have fruit in a can, you get it in its own juice. Or if it's tuna, you get it in water. And so it's teaching people how to read labels so that they don't feel like if I don't go to Whole Foods and buy some food I've never seen before that will cost me an arm and a leg, that I don't have access to healthy food. It's sometimes just about preparation and reading the labels, what's in what you're eating. Group 5 talked about, group 4, I won't skip group 4, early exposure. And so it's that same thing. A 79-year-old never ate an eggplant because they were never exposed to an eggplant, even though they may have grown up in a city that's surrounded by farms and gardens. It's just not how they live. And so I do like the concept of exposing children to things that they have not seen. And that's a partnership with our local school systems, whether it's the large Shelby County school system, or it's the charter schools individually, or the charter systems, or it's our suburban neighbors in the school systems that they run. And so it's a campaign with children. And I always say, and I said in our group, when I was a child, I grew up in North Memphis. There were not a lot of forests around my house. I don't recall any forest, honestly. But they sold me on not starting forest fires with a big, I guess he was a dog. No, was he a dog? Probably a dog mascot. And he told us not to start forest fires. And children are great marketers because partly 5-year-olds and 6-year-olds, if you sell them on something they sell it to their parents, whether their parents want to hear it or not. And they're forcing their parents not to litter or start forest fires. And we've moved away from that education. So it was Smokey. Somebody's telling me it was Smokey. Oh, he was a bear. And so, not a dog. But I didn't have a forest, but I believe that we shouldn't start forest fires. And so there's opportunities with young people to help us market our messages around food access, security, and eliminating food waste. So logistics kept coming up. I always say that, humans, we split the atom, but for some reason we can't figure anything else out. But we managed to do that, and we're mapping the DNA helix, but we dumb down on what should be pretty simple tasks about getting food to all of humanity. In a city that is built, has industries built around logistics, our largest employers are logistics based. And so there certainly are opportunities to collaborate with the private sector on how we store, refrigerate, and move food so that we're serving all of our citizens with a large number of them. No, somebody's telling me it was the dog was McGruff, and he was drugs. He was anti-drugs, and the bear was the forest fire guy. And so, but you get my point that children are great marketers. So if we educate them early around food and about foods that they may not see at home, then they may want to try it. But going back to the logistics piece, fulfillment centers. And so we were talking to a young lady out of Karen Karp out of, I think she's out of New York, but she was doing work with bodegas. And so we've seen the grocery industry over the last 4 or 5 decades change drastically from the mom and pop, the bodega size store, to massive warehouse stores of 70,000 square feet that sell TVs and everything else, not just food. They don't have a focus on food. That margins of grocery stores we recognize are about 3 to 5%, really more than 3% range. And so they're doing everything in their power to make a living, eke out a living. And you think about corner stores who are buying at retail from Sam's or Costco and selling at a higher retail, and their lifeblood is in lottery tickets and loose cigarettes illegally or other things like that. And so how do we help them solve part of their issue of supply? We have local suppliers that have a minimum purchase requirement for grocery stores, and they have not created anything that fits the corner store that may not do that much purchasing in a year. And so there are opportunities for us to create fulfillment centers in partnership with large retail grocers to supply grocery stores, because people have a lack of transportation, which also came up. And of course, as a developer of neighborhoods, I always like the idea of people talking about transportation and infrastructure so that people can navigate the neighborhoods regardless of whether they own a private vehicle or if they're a pedestrian or a cyclist or they have mobility issues and they're in a wheelchair or walker. It should be a place for all users and however they're getting around. I agree with Group 10 that volunteer staffing only is a problem. And so how do we get not just philanthropy, because we rely so heavily on philanthropy, but the private sector involved? And I sell private sector people, including banks, on how is it good for you? And so grocery stores who employ low-income people, how do you have a better employee? Well, you make sure that their life beyond your store is better. So they have better quality housing, they have access to food, their children are not suffering with asthma due to environmental issues in their home. They don't have diabetes, and so that is food related, not genetic. And so they can come to work, they can make your margins greater, and they are happier and healthier. And so we have to find ways to help the private sector meet their bottom line, because we will not accept the fact that they are not in the business as philanthropists, they're in the business to make money. And so what is their required rate of return? How do we help them get there at the same time as helping us get our rate of return, whether it's financial or not, whether it's about making people have better lives. So I kind of already talked about education, nutrition classes in the younger children, and that was group 11. And group 12 talked about asset mapping, logistics, and collaboration. So we must collaborate. And to give you an example of that, the Works has some history of collaborating with grocers even. So we've given out 1.2 million in loans to a local independent grocer in order for the grocer to stay in Southgate, a grocer to stay in Southgate, not Kroger, but now in Cash Saver, and to expand service in an existing Cash Saver on Elvis Presley. And so we have established a partnership that led to this organization supplying us at their cost. That means that we can sell at a lower cost in a convenience size store. And so there are opportunities to collaborate. And, so a few months ago, last year, we did a mini documentary with the Guardian newspaper out of London and out of the United Kingdom. And it led to Kroger, who we have been trying to get to. And what we don't realize is that Kroger is the largest grocery retailer in the US, and it's the 5th largest retailer in general. And so how do we take advantage of the massive number of Krogers that we have in Memphis? They rule the market, the grocery market here. And so Kroger contacted me to go and see something that they were doing in Louisville. So I flew to Louisville, and they had a mobile grocery store. So it's like our little grocers in South Memphis, but it was on wheels and it went to stops. And so it went to housing developments. The first stop, I told them that was a bad idea. We went to the Urban League, but people don't usually shop for groceries as they're looking for jobs. And so we have to think about how we individually operate and not do things in low income areas that don't make sense in general, like put a mobile grocer at 8 a.m. at an Urban League while they're taking computer classes, because nobody's going to take their perishable things in. There's nowhere to store it. And so the 2 hours from 8 to 10 did not make sense, but it definitely made sense that all of the housing developments were stopped. The people already had a list and they were ready to shop, and they knew that Kroger mobile was coming back the same time, same day, the next week. And so they got to know the staff of Kroger. And so we are actually planning to do that with Kroger in Memphis and partner with agencies throughout the city where you have these gaps in these deserts, or somebody called it food apartheid. And in these places like swaths of North Memphis where there's no access to food, and then there's a lack of transportation. Group 12 talked about, well, I talked about group 12. Group 13 talked about creating a system that works cross sector. And so that kind of speaks to going across the nonprofit sector, the restaurant business, the grocery business, grocery retailers, and other private sector businesses, including our largest employer, FedEx, to help us figure out this logistics issue that they can manage to get packages to Memphis that are really going from Manhattan to Brooklyn, but they come to Memphis to go to Manhattan from Brooklyn. And if we can figure that out, and we can do that by 2:15 a.m. sort down, and I know that because I used to work at FedEx for a period in the hub, and if we can figure that out, we certainly should be able to figure out cross-sector solutions. And I already talked about group 14, and the great group 15 talked about food waste. And we brought up in our group this idea of food as having to be pretty. Well, once you cook it, you don't know what it looked like. And so, and I talked about the American obsession with the lawn, and I can't say that I don't have the obsession with this mold space that is green, and we make it greener by spraying green stuff on it. It's the same obsession we have with food. And so if we can change our concept around pretty food found in grocery stores and go back to something that we were doing before when we were farmers. We were taking all of the food from our farms and we were feeding either our households, the people in our house, the animals on the farm, or our neighbors and those around us. And so I'll stop because I think I've gone on too long. Sorry, Angelica.
Okay. Thank you so much, Rashawn, for doing a great job wrapping up and covering all of the groups and what was discussed. So everybody, thank you so much for your time again. Go and stretch. We will be communicating with everyone following up after this conference today with the presentations, with compiled notes from all of the breakout groups. That will probably take a little bit of time to put together, but you will be getting that. And please make sure that if you have any ideas or would like to continue doing work on this to be part of the solution, that was the point of today, was really to kind of get the conversation started, get the juices flowing, and make sure that, and encourage people to reach out and continue to strategize. So please don't hesitate to connect with us in the future and reach out to the email registration if you would like to be a part of future work. So thanks again, everybody, for your time today, and good luck with the rest of your day.